My name is Susie Chant. I'm the MLA for North Vancouver Seymour, and today I'm speaking with Dorothy, who has very kindly invited me to talk to her about her experience in a pre-vaccine environment associated with polio. Dorothy has had polio as a child and went through the experience of moving through polio as hospitalized, and then has had the ongoing situation of post-polio syndrome. And one of the things that was not available to her at the time, although it was under discussion, was the vaccine for polio. And at this point, we know a lot about the polio vaccine, and it's part of our lives. And so what our discussion is around is the impact of a vaccine on the long term. So Dorothy, thank you very much for speaking with me this morning.
It's a pleasure.
And can you tell me a little bit about your experience? So you were 10.
I was.
And can you tell me a little bit about your experience in getting polio and how that evolved for you?
Yes, I went with friends at Easter that year and up to Buttle Lake area to camp.
Okay.
And stayed there for the weekend and came back, and around middle of the week had what my mother considered were flu symptoms. And but at that time doctors made house calls, so the doctor came out to see me and went off and discussed, and I was concerned about why they were away from me.
Yes.
And that afternoon I went into the hospital. So not really knowing, just still thinking it was a flu.
Wow.
And went into the Jubilee Hospital and was there for quite a few months. And it was the following day that I found that I had something called polio. And it had affected me to the point where when I was driving in the car on the way to the hospital, I couldn't sit upright. I kept sliding over against my dad, and kept saying, "Are you tired?" And anyway, I sweat. By the time I got in there, I had lost control of my arms and my upper torso, but not my breathing.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about, because when I think about polio, I've met a number of people with polio syndrome, because I worked with a group downtown, which is another matter, that ended up ventilated on those external ventilators.
Yes.
And you didn't.
I never had to, no.
Because it does sound like that was a very frightening experience, just to have that change so quickly.
It would be.
Yeah.
It was frightening enough physically.
Sure.
But if I'd had something like inability to breathe properly, it would have been very
absolutely.
concerning. But I was in hospital for, I don't really remember, but it was more than a month.
Yep.
And which led us into the summer.
Sure.
So we were off school, and then that fall I did not go back to school, but I was at home, but incapacitated somewhat. I just would be taken from my bedroom down outside and into the kitchen area and carried there and lived that way for a while, and then eventually went back to school in January. And over that year, the next year, I got better and then led a somewhat normal life until about 20 years ago I started contracting post-polio, which at that time was not really diagnosed at all. It was, nobody knew what it was, and I had all kinds of things diagnosed. And it wasn't until my brother, who was a doctor in California, phoned me and said, "You know what you have is post-polio." And he said, "It's not a matter of whether you get post-polio having had polio, it's that how badly do you get it." And he said it does progress year by year.
Yep.
The term at that time was about 7 to 10% a year. You lose the ability, and it's certainly proven true.
Yeah.
And but it's not something that has any future ahead of it, because, to be frank, we're all dying off. So there's no point in doing any research or anything.
Right.
But polio, through the Rotary Club, I remember they were very prominent in counteracting polio and providing vaccines.
Really?
And,
the Rotary Club was part of the vaccine process?
Well, they did. They funded and advertised and helped people to a great extent.
Yep.
And they still do, I believe, to this day, but there's only a couple of countries in Africa that still have a problem with polio.
Right.
And that is lack of vaccine,
Right.
because there are people who don't know how important the vaccine can be,
Or they don't have access to
or
it.
don't have access.
Or they don't have a health system that is able to provide it successfully.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's been an education process.
Oh, well, no
The whole
kidding.
thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Doris, I can interject just quickly. The medical people on Vancouver Island, especially some specialists,
Yep.
they should lose their license because they just came down so hard on Dorothy. If you lost weight, you would be fine. And
Right.
I'm not gonna see you until you lose weight.
That's difficult.
Get out of my office.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's very difficult for you.
Mhm.
That's really
It is.
rough, because then they're not focusing on the whole picture.
No,
No.
not
No,
quite true.
no, that's very discouraging for you. I'm sorry to hear that.
No.
Yeah. So let's talk about the vaccine. So
Mhm.
my perception is that did you get vaccinated later, or did they
No.
not vaccinate you because you had
No,
it?
because I'd had it, and so they felt that I'd formed an immunity, which proved true,
Yeah.
and so I didn't get vaccinated. But I feel very strongly about the control of a disease
Yes.
by being vaccinated,
Sure.
and trusting our medical system that if they feel it will help, that it will help, and giving them the opportunity to help by being vaccinated. So
Right.
I certainly was among the forefront,
Right.
age-wise as well as any other way,
So,
of
because
getting
certainly had you
vaccinated.
been vaccinated,
for COVID.
your trajectory at that point, and maybe, and probably, and now, never mind, maybe and probably, your trajectory would be different because you wouldn't be dealing with post-polio.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, and that's still something with the COVID situation that we're still, we've got no information on.
We don't.
We know that we've got the long haulers, which is somebody that's had COVID and is still ill a couple of months later. But we have no idea what's 20 years down the road.
No.
So the vaccine is, pretty important
Yes.
to try and avert those long-term things that we really don't know a lot about.
No. And I
Yeah.
feel it's not just a personal thing that we get vaccine. It's for everyone around us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Is to try and stop this pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, I feel that's important.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't say how much I agree with you.
Okay.
I actually have been very fortunate. Not fortunate, whatever you want to call it. I've actually vaccinated 400 people.
Oh my goodness.
Because I'm a nurse by trade,
Ah.
and I'm still associated with Vancouver Coastal Health as a casualty, so I've been doing some vaccinations. And so,
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And it's good to be able, as I see people coming through, because the vaccination clinics have always been very busy. So on the flip side, we are hitting the 80 percentile now, and in the 12 and over group, and certainly we've hit the 80% for the first doses, and we're I think in the high 70s now for second doses. So we're doing well. It's just that last oomph
Yes.
that we really need, to get over that line and get everybody vaccinated to keep us all safe.